Hello and welcome to my presentation, which is using technology to make listening more interactive. I've been teaching using Zoom all semester, but talking at my computer screen in an empty room has never really gotten more comfortable. So forgive me if I sound a little awkward or terrible. I'll do my best not to be an awkward mess, but can't make too many promises. Anyway, so why listening? Well, I used to teach at a university, and at that university, the standard was for all of the first-year English students to write a listening test. So regardless of their major, regardless of their teacher, we all had the exact same set of questions based on the exact same textbook and textbook audio files that we had to give the students for a significant portion of their grade. And the students hated it. They thought the listenings were boring. They thought the test was too hard and too difficult, just too complicated. And so it was just the worst part of the class for me as well. I did not enjoy doing the listenings. Each track was at least 3 or 4 minutes long. It was a little excessive. But anyway, so I wanted to make it a little better for them and help them perform a little better in the class. So I set out to revamp their listening activities. And I had a couple approaches in mind that I wanted to use. The first was I wanted to use an integrated skills approach. Integrated skills approach, of course, assumes that the multiple English strands, which can sometimes be reduced to listening, speaking, reading, and writing, are all really important and should be taught together. So unlike how our textbook wanted it with their speaking section, their listening section, their reading section, and their writing section, I wanted to combine several of the sections together so that the students were practicing more than one at once. The benefits to integrated skills approaches are they're more authentic and conversation-like. Like a real conversation, right? Normally people talk back and you have a two-way, listening, speaking, listening, speaking. Sometimes you factor in a bit of reading if you're going to show something on a phone, etc. So it's more authentic and natural conversation style. They're also just in general better preferred by students. Students like integrated skills more. Because they expose their exposure to English, increase their English, increase their interest, increases their motivation, it increases their confidence, and it can reduce stress. And then from a teacher's perspective, they can also be more time efficient, because instead of having your speaking time, your writing time, your listening time, you kind of combine it together so you can teach more skills at the same time. And they can be more student-centered as well. So I really wanted to use some integrated skills approaches. I also wanted to use some CALL, computer-assisted language learning, because even though CALL is really big and really broad, can be anything from educational software to TED Talks to personal assistants. It's got a lot of benefits as well. Typically, CALL studies find increased comprehension or ability. Increased motivation is especially common CALL results. And students often find them fun and will spend more time engaging with CALL materials. So I wanted to try to use a bit of CALL as well. In particular, I wanted to use CALL with their mobile phones. One of the great benefits of teaching at a Korean university is the students almost always have a working cell phone. I think the only time a student didn't have a phone is because they had just broken it. So there's a high phone penetration in university level students. So it's really common. Everyone has one. And the most important reason I wanted it is every mobile phone has a media player built in. So if you give the students an audio file, they can control the pacing of their listening. So it can become very student-centric just by moving the listening from a shared speaker system to a one-person controlled cell phone. And another important thing is I wasn't particularly interested in reinventing listening entirely. So I took a lot of lens patterns of listening activities and I kind of combined them with Bingham and Larson's suggestions for making call programs. It's not a perfect combination, but that was my intention. My intention was to take things like answering, where students just answer questions about a text, and add some sort of familiar system with a realistic goal that they could repeatedly build on using their mobile phones. So that was kind of my intent, especially with these first set of activities. So these, I call these cut-up comprehension questions. And they're, again, mostly based off of just answering questions. But instead of having, as I said, one giant speaker system, the students have a more jigsaw sort of listening, where they each have a section of the listening activity, the audio file, and they have to piece the listening together by talking to their partners. So it becomes a listening jigsaw activity. The really literal jigsaw one is this one, which I just call comprehension jigsaw. This one involves taking an audio track and cutting it into pieces and giving students a worksheet with questions based off the whole audio track. So students will have to listen, find the answers they can, and talk to their group members for the answers they couldn't find. So the basic procedure for this is you put them in groups. One student has one file, another student has a different version of the file, but they all have the same questions. And then they'll need to download the audio file and listen to it on their phone. Using headphones is great. I've had students not have headphones and they just hold their smartphone to their ear. It works well enough as well. But this gives them the ability to control their pacing of the listening by letting them repeat or slow down if needed. And they need to find the questions they can answer and answer them. And then they need to talk to their partners for the answers they can't. So I have an example worksheet here. Here's the example worksheet. You can see that there are about 12 questions here. And I tried to scramble the answers. So if you had the first bit of the listening, you had more. It wasn't just question 1, 2, 3. It'd be question 1, question 7, and question 11 or something. So they were a little scrambled. And I also had the listening here. And unfortunately, this file's a bit long, so I won't play the whole thing. But if we play like the first 15 seconds or so, you might see, oh, look, there's one question. But then if they don't have the rest.
Sorry, but how much are these miniskirts?
They're 59,000 won each. They're newly in from Italy.
Oh, they're really cool, especially this blue denim one.
So you can kind of see the idea, right? They listen, they answer the question. It's pretty straightforward. The only trick to this, of course, is they can't answer all the questions. So they also need to recognize when they can't hear something. And then, of course, they need to use some speaking to say to their partners. Another variant of the same activity is you cut up the listening tracks into different sections, and you keep them in kind of order. You don't scramble it too much, but you misnumber them. And so students have to figure out which one came first, which one came second, which one came third, which one came fourth. So let me just draw a little. Here's your listening. Cut it to section A, B, and C. And then you give it to the students, separate it out, and they have to decide which one is number 1, which one is number 2, which one is number 3. So it's pretty, it's not too complicated. It's just another jigsaw, of course. And again, you put them in groups. They listen to their modified file. They control it at their individual speed. And then to get a little bit of writing, I had them write a short summary for each listening. And then they should meet their group after they've written their summary, and using speaking, tell their group members what happened in their listening, and then have them ask questions to each other until they decide which one came first, which one came second, which one was third. And then they can listen to the entire listening and reflect upon if they were correct, incorrect, and why they felt that way. So to save time, I'm not going to show you the listening, but I'll show you example scripts. So this is, for example, listening A, and you can see it's kind of in the middle of a conversation. You can see listening B, you can kind of see more of a start to a conversation. C, some sort of middle again, actually an ending, see a goodbye. And of course, listening D, you can see, again, kind of a middle. And so you can kind of match these starts to questions here and things like that. And then, of course, here's some example summaries, but you know how to write a summary. And the last comprehension variant I have here is an eavesdropping activity. In this one, you cut out one of the speakers entirely, and you replace it with a pause or sound effect. So I have an example here, which will sound something like this.
Hello, is Joan there? Yes, this is Sherry Smith calling. Would you ask her to call me back?
Hopefully you heard that. I think, yeah, I said that correctly. But you can hear one of the people's voices is completely gone. It's just a dang now. And so the students must listen, use their understanding of the context and the phrases they've learned to fill in the missing blanks. So it's really important students understand the context and the schema surrounding this listening. And so they need to listen, and they need to write down what phrases could go to fill in those blanks. And there are a couple different ways you could finish this, but one of the ways I like to do this is to build in some sort of audiolingual part into this, and have, after they've made their guesses, partner listen to their half. So what we just heard with the ding, and then repeat what they hear. So if the audio track says, "Hello, my name is Joan," the person will listen to that, pause, then say, "Hi, my name is, hello, sorry, my name is Joan." And so they get a bit of that listening. And then, of course, their partner listens to them. When they're finished, they listen to their clip, and then they repeat as well. So some audiolingual as well as some hearing it from partners as well. And they can compare their lines, reflect if they're correct, incorrect, or if it's just, you know, an alternative sentence, and have them think on it, basically. So that's one kind of big activity with several variants. I made these using a program called Audacity. So as I said, my students were forced to use the listening clips. So Audacity is a program. I really like Audacity because it's a free open source software, so it's really useful. It's a little harder to download these days than it used to be, but you can find it at audacityteam.org and download. Pick whatever version you have. They've moved it to an external download site. Just be careful. This ad is not the one you want. You don't want this. This is not the right download button. This is an ad. You want this one down here, or this one, or this one. Yeah. So that's my quick warning about Audacity. It's a little harder to download these days. But once you have it, it's a really straightforward program. Let's just make it full screen. It's got a play button. It's got a record button. It's got a zoom. It's got some other functions. It can do quite a bit, including adding sound effects and stuff. So I'm just going to drag the file in. Here we go. And you can just zoom in, so it's a little easier. Press play. Be like, oh, I don't need this intro bit. Let's choose this I tool and delete it. Or if you want to be like, oh, this person's dialogue, I want to remove it, delete it. I want to replace it with a ding sound. I like to use generate pluck. And then you can choose the amount of time. 1 second seems okay. And then there's a little pluck sound. If you want to just copy a bit, it's really easy to, again, just highlight using this I tool, press Control-C, make a new Audacity, and then copy it in. So if you want just to copy out different sections, this is a really useful way to copy out small sections. And it's probably obvious to most people, but the reason there are two identical wave patterns here and here is for listening in your headphones. This will come out, I think, on the left speaker, and this will come out on the right speaker. So yeah, that's very basic Audacity. I've never really used it to do too much funny stuff, just cutting out voices and adding in flux and modifying the sentence a bit. Modifying the listening a bit, I'm sorry. So that's a really, really, really quick way to do it, and a really easy software to do it. I put the download links here along with their own warnings and their own ways to check. Feel free to check those out. But again, the basic rule is if there's a big blue download button, it's wrong. This one is correct. So that's my only warning about downloading Audacity. But yeah, so that's one sort of big activity that came, well, it's 3 activities that all come from the same sort of pattern. I have two more, which are a little bit more involved than just cutting up listening activities. So I call these student-generated comparisons. And this one's a little tricky because you need not just webcams and microphones, but you need some sort of website for hosting active videos. Thankfully, there are several really useful places you can do this, and I'll introduce you to one after. But in this one, the students generate the listenings themselves, and then you use those to make a compare and contrast. I've used the cut up comprehension variants to help my students who had the standardized test. But these are a little more useful for students who just need more conversation practice or practice speaking and listening. It's a little harder to do this with a mandatory sort of textbook. But anyway, the objective is students generate their own listenings. In this, then, the procedure is students will write a script relevant to the lesson. You can do it as a monologue or a role play. I've done the role play version myself, which was pretty good. I can't show you, unfortunately, because I didn't get their permission to do it. But basically, the students worked together, they made a role play, and then they recorded themselves speaking. And then all of those videos were put in a place that was accessible for the students, who then listened to the listenings, filled out a table, and did a compare and contrast activity. There are some requirements, like you should try to guide the students to make sure they have some things that are able to be compared. Like we did, when I did this, I did this as a shopping role play. So I told the students they must tell what they bought, where they bought it, and how much it cost. So that there's one thing, or three things rather, that were kind of standardized between all of the different listenings. So it gave them quite a bit of, but also gave them a lot of differences as well. So it was really useful. Students used a phone to record, or a camera or computer with webcam and microphone. They need a website. Again, I'll introduce a good one shortly. And again, they write a script. Oh no, sorry, that's a different activity. I totally jumped ahead of myself. I told you I might mess up. So yeah, that's how that works. I'm sorry. They write a script, they record themselves, and then they do a compare and contrast activity. It's really useful, I think, for students to listen to the other classmates' voices, because if we want to teach English as a truly global language, they need exposure to different accents. So the more times they hear people who aren't native speakers speaking, the more they be able to adapt to actual world English. So that's another benefit to having the students generate content. And then the last example activity I have, this is student-generated directions. So it's very similar in a way to the comprehension, but also, you know, its own thing. This one builds off of the lens activities again, based off of I think the drawing version it's called. But anyway, students will write a script where they give directions, record themselves speaking their script, and then students have to follow the directions to where their classmate wants them to go. This is a pretty common listening activity. I'm sure many of you have done this before, where you have to listen and follow on a map. So pretty common, but the difference is the students make these ones. So the procedure involves making a map You can let them draw their own, or you can share a bitmap. Depends on how you want to do it. They have to write directions from a start to an end. And the destination should be a secret and should not be marked or named. The starting point should be marked, the ending point should not be marked. And the video should, of course, be uploaded to our hosting site, and they should watch and make a response. So again, we're getting some listening in directly, and then for the integrated, we get the integrated in with their answer. Are they writing or are they speaking? And they need to tell us whose video they watched, where they ended up. So when I did this using Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is really useful because it's a great website for recording and hosting videos. The editing on Flipgrid is very, very minor. So it kind of expects students to do their speaking in one take. But the real benefit is it can host the videos for you without taking up any memory on your computers or your own Google Drives. A couple other benefits: students don't need to make Flipgrid accounts. If they have a Google account or a school email or a neighbor email, those all work really well as long as you type them in and give the domain permission. And I'll give you an example how to do that shortly. You can control if students see each other's videos or not. There's an app version if students don't have webcams, and it works well on Edge, Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. It won't work on Internet Explorer, but really nothing except Korean websites work on Internet Explorer anyway. And it does connect to Google Classroom. So let me give you a couple examples. So this is my main Flipgrid, or just a Flipgrid rather. If you want to invite students, I'll just kind of add a grid. And you can, this is your class name. And then you can pick whether you want to use school email, student ID, or educator learning. I don't think this one's useful if you want like a public one. These ones are for controlling things. I recommend the school email one. And then I'll give you a code. You press next, and you can type the emails. So at Gmail is in there on default. You can see my terrible typing here. But if you're teaching Korean students, you might also want to add at Naver or whatever web addresses your students are using. It might need to be connected to a Google account, so make sure it is. And then you hit next, and then anyone with that email can access to this link. You can post it in a classroom, or you can just copy the hyperlink, and then it'll take you here. You can do all sorts of edits in here. And this is like your home page, and down here are where you make your topics. So you make a topic, you name it. You can give them details. Etc. You can control how long, so you can be like very short video, very long video. It's up to you. And then video moderation is useful. If you turn this on, students can't see each other's videos unless you say okay. If this is off, as soon as a student is done, you can see their video. And if you want, you can add a picture or something. So that's a very short way and short tutorial. I would like to show you some example directions grids. So I have permission from these students. to share these with you. And you can see these students drew a map and they marked right here, start, and then they're going to give directions where to go.
Once you go forward, you will see the three-way intersection. First, go to left, then you will pass the school, but turn right before you go to the park, and you will see McDonald's. Turn left. If you go straight, the post office will be on the left. The other side is your purpose.
So you can see it's really useful. This is not taking up any of my Google Drive. They can hide behind the pictures and then they can easily listen. Also, there's a reply function. So if you press this, I'm going to hide. You have to allow a camera, but you can easily just be like, nope, I'm blank. You can't see me. You can put stickers to hide your face and stuff. But you can record a reply video. And then be like, hi, this is a reply video. Your video was awesome. And then next. And then be like, hi, this is minor editing you can do. Take a selfie. Next. And then video is ready to go. Submitted. It's very easy. Now
Once you go,
there's a reply down here. So you could even make a sort of conversation activity using this. So it's a very useful website. If you'd like to try experimenting with Flipgrid from the student side, I've included a link to that Flipgrid up here where you can see my students' examples. I've also put the instructions for the particular directions activity here. So feel free to try following those instructions if you'd like. But that's basically what I wanted to talk about with my presentation. In terms of effectiveness, I've done the student-generated content and the directions Flipgrid at my current workplace. And the students seem to like it. I didn't take any informal surveys on it or anything, but I've always got good results and good videos. But the cut-up comprehension activities at the start, I use those primarily at my old university. They work a little better in person. The Flipgrid activities were better for this weird Corona situation we ended up in. But again, the cut-up comprehension were made to assist students in preparing for that standardized listening test. And it seemed to have been effective. The students took sort of an informal survey about the listening, and they seemed to like those listening activities more than the basic listen and write the comprehension questions activities. Feedback surveys at the end of semester for those students also reported that they found the listening tests in general easier than previous years where I hadn't done the more integrated and cell phone requiring activities. So I think in my very small sample size, the results were mostly positive. So I hope these activities are useful and help you guys teach listening to your students. Thank you for coming, and bye.